to the investment series Cryptocurrency. My name's Adrian Frinsdorf, Director of Wealth Advisory here at Wiliam, and today I'm with Jeremy Majid from Hardblock, the Cryptocurrency Exchange. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks, Hedge. Great to be here.
Crypto assets have got a lot of, well, I guess because they've gone up so much. When we're talking crypto, do you have a simple definition?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do my best. So Bitcoin is the original cryptocurrency. And what it did that has really, I think, changed the world is that it allows you to store value from the real world in a digital format. So if you earn a salary, you can now take that salary and store it digitally on the internet through Bitcoin. Now, before that, we could only really store information on the internet, which was still transformational, but because every time you send that information, it's actually copied, it's not very good for money. But now Bitcoin actually allows us to store something scarce on the internet, and there is a connection to the real world in that Bitcoin is mined through electricity, but the massive innovation is being able to store money or value digitally, which means you can send it on the internet. And that's really what Bitcoin is about and what has kind of created this new, I guess, phase of innovation.
Great, yeah. Well, a lot of our investors have read about crypto, but they haven't actually invested in it.
Yep.
What sort of message? Have they missed the boat, or what sort of message?
Oh, they definitely haven't missed the boat. Cast your mind back about 20 years ago. So I finished school in 2000, and I used to take a floppy disk to school to take my files to school. Now I use cloud storage to solve that problem. But the floppy disk manufacturer, they didn't become the cloud storage provider, because the floppy disk company has a factory and suppliers and trucks and inventory, and it's a completely different business model to what the cloud storage provider is. Now kind of think about today, and I'm going to say something that's going to sound pretty crazy. I think Bitcoin will replace most of the existing financial system, including the central banks, and the payment processors. But it's going to take time. It's going to take 20 years. And it would have been crazy to say 20 years ago, you're going to walk around with a phone in your pocket with the internet and have all the world's music on it. But we do have that, right? And it would be crazy to say that we're going to have exactly the same things we have now in 20 years. So if you're holding a portfolio that have exposure to, say, bank shares, which most people would, or bonds, or any kind of fiat currency exposure, I would at least hold a proportion of Bitcoin, maybe 1%, like a small proportion as insurance. Because if Bitcoin succeeds, large parts of existing portfolios are going to go down because they just won't be able to compete with this software that has incredibly low transaction fees.
So when we're talking crypto here, but you're talking specifically about Bitcoin.
Yes.
You think that's the one that will prevail?
Yeah, so it's kind of a controversial view, but one thing to remember is Bitcoin is open source software. So it's free to download and copy. Anyone can do that. But what happens is if you don't change anything, then it's just Bitcoin. So what people do is they change some aspect of it, like they make it faster or they make it do more complicated things. But what they've done in that process is they've sacrificed the decentralization of it. So all of the altcoins have made decisions like that, which make it so that they will have to become more centralized in the future. Now, the reason Bitcoin is decentralized is because it gives it censorship or attack resistance. It means that nobody can basically attack it because it's living on 50,000 computers all over the world. Now, if you're trying to make a new form of money, many people want to attack it, particularly, even the US government. So there's no point giving up decentralization because that's the entire point of having a cryptocurrency. If you kind of look back to, say, the dot-com boom, when we were kind of going through this phase of not having the internet to having the internet, there was amazing excitement around all these new companies, and basically any internet company could just raise money, even if they didn't have any business. And I think something similar is happening now in the crypto space. So yeah, there are cryptocurrencies and they're really good at marketing, they've got a good story, but if you dig deeper underneath and look at the tech, they're actually not solving the problem that Bitcoin's trying to solve. And in fact, I don't think any of them will survive. The open source software thing works both ways. So any innovation in the crypto space can actually come back into Bitcoin and become like a side chain of Bitcoin and serve that same function. So yeah, realistically, what I'm seeing is that we believe Bitcoin is a safe investment. If you want to speculate, you could make money in altcoins, but that's not our business. We're into saving.
Fantastic. Now, I've read a lot of press about Bitcoin as an inflation hedge, which there was an article yesterday saying that's not working because gold's going up and Bitcoin's down at the moment.
Yep.
What is the rationale with Bitcoin as an inflation hedge?
Yeah, so when I listen to some podcasts, they talk about Bitcoin is still kind of a speculative asset. So people are sort of leveraged into it and trying to make short-term gains on it. And I think that's why it's sort of more correlated with, say, the NASDAQ than gold, which is not so leveraged at all. There's kind of two key differences. And I think like I think we actually have inflation now. Like my brother just told me his car has gone up in value in 5 years, his Hyundai. And I just saw a story this morning. There's 20% rent inflation in America, apartments in American capital cities. So that's real inflation. But people are not panicking yet and trying to get out of their currencies and find some other store of value. In the 70s it was gold, but I don't think it's going to be gold this time because Bitcoin has some huge advantages over gold. For starters, it's 24/7, 365. It's always available. No one has to send it to you. No one has to process an order. It's just all happening on the internet. So it's going to scale up much better than gold. So if the world is coming in and looking for a store of value, gold coins are not going to cut it. Secondly, the supply of Bitcoin is fixed. So there will only ever be 21 million coins. At the moment, the inflation in gold and Bitcoin is about the same. But in another 2 years, Bitcoin's inflation will halve and it will keep the inflation rate will keep declining until there's no more Bitcoin. So if you're looking to hold a store of value for decades, Bitcoin is going to be far superior because the inflation is lower. And if you are holding gold, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, because I hold some gold, I think there's a risk that gold users will eventually move to Bitcoin. So yeah, I think it would be risky to not hold Bitcoin in my opinion, just because of all those properties.
Just on a practical aspect, so people can purchase Bitcoin from your exchange,
Yep.
And they log on. I've gone through that process
Yep.
myself. When transacting in Bitcoin, if I wanted to buy a Tesla, how does that work?
Okay,
Not
so
that I'm buying Tesla.
yeah, any
as an
car,
example.
any large
Yes.
purchase, sure. So essentially, Bitcoin is a ledger. So each block is actually just an accounting ledger that's full of transactions, and the ledger goes back all the way to the start. So what you need to do to transfer Bitcoin to someone is write a transaction to the next block or a future block. So you would need to have a Bitcoin wallet, and an exchange wallet has one, or you could get a free one that you could download. You need to have Bitcoin in it, and you would just pay a small fee. At the moment it's as little as 10 cents, and then you just have to wait till it goes into a block, which could take between 10 minutes and an hour usually.
Right. Okay, well, it's a very different transaction process to us buying shares and managed funds and the likes.
Very different, and it's also irreversible. So once it's in that block, no one can change that.
Right.
So you have to be very careful not to make mistakes or send to the wrong person, for example.
So where can let's say I've got a certain amount of Bitcoin, where can I actually spend it at the moment? Because I imagine it can only be for people that accept Bitcoin.
Yeah, so the main use of Bitcoin is a store of value right now.
Yep.
And that's how I mostly use it. And you can self-custody it with your own, it's called a hardware wallet, so there's no counterparty risk. But for example, there are services overseas, like I use ProtonMail, and they accept Bitcoin. So you probably wouldn't use it initially to buy things, but in the future I think it will be much more common.
Right, so at the moment it's predominantly just purely for investing rather than transacting, but there will be a time, if Bitcoin plays out the way I've read, and I notice a difference in me reading and you watching podcasts, that's an age thing.
Yep.
We will be able to transact in Bitcoin. Will that change its volatility?
Well, I think the reason that Bitcoin will succeed is because you'll be able to transact in it. So already it's used for remittances, so we don't have that problem here so much, but remittances to El Salvador is a really good use case for it. And also like wire transfers, it's a fantastic option if you want to do a wire transfer. It's much faster and cheaper, especially between countries that don't have great relationships. But I think the reason it will become a great store of value is because people will come to it for the transactions. So for example, merchants using the Lightning Network, which sits above Bitcoin, they don't have to pay to receive money via Bitcoin, whereas they have to pay around 2% on Visa and MasterCard. So this is going to take time. Like the infrastructure is not there for the whole world to use it today.
Right.
But over the next 10, 20 years, I think you'll find, like my kids, my youngsters too, I think he'll pay for his coffee in Bitcoin.
Yes, but it's hard to get our heads around that.
Yeah.
You hear a lot of negative press about Bitcoin, and we had a conversation, you were saying it's because Bitcoin doesn't have a marketing department. Can you elaborate on that? Yeah,
so Bitcoin, it's kind of a new concept. It's a decentralized, it's not even an organization, but it is purely decentralized. There's no CEO, there's no legal counsel, there's no PR department. So if someone publishes a negative article about it, nobody's suing them to say, you can't publish this. So there's not really a disincentive for media outlets to do that. At the same time, you actually can't destroy Bitcoin, but what you can do is change people's perception of it and change and control the narrative. So if you kind of consider that there are big entities that have a lot to lose, potentially like the Reserve Bank, the federal bank in America, they can still use the media to control public opinion. And I even saw an article today about the Reserve Bank looking to push a central bank digital currency. You could imagine that maybe a few days ago they published a negative article about Bitcoin, so that would be more positively received. So yeah, you will see negative things in the media, but I'm sure, for example, you don't do your investing based on the newspaper either, right? So the due diligence is what you need to do to see through that.
Fantastic. Well, Jeremy, that's been fantastic. We're at very early stages of our cryptocurrency journey, mainly because I'm young compared to a lot of my clients.
Okay.
Our younger clients seem to get this really well.
Yep.
Thank you for taking the time to explain it today. You are Adelaide's only crypto exchange.
We are, yes. Yep.
How can they get in touch? What's the...
Yes, I mean, they can just Google Hardblock and they'll find us, or hardblock.com.au, or if you just put hello at the front of that, so hello@hardblock.com.au, we'll be able to help you out as well.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much for coming in today.
No worries, it's great to be here.